Welcome back to the Hardware Unboxed podcast for episode 86. This one is a bit of a rant. We have asked you for all of your grievances with Windows 11, and we are going to go through all of them, talking about the bloatware, the bad features, the stuff that doesn't work, the ads, the telemetry, all that stuff in a big detailed episode about the current state of Windows. So yeah, let's get into it. Well, first up, Steve, just want to thank our audience for coming to the party with some stuff that they hate about Windows 11, because that is what we're going to be talking about for most of today's podcast. We put out some feelers, or at least a little thing on the community tab for the Hardware Unboxed podcast YouTube channel, and we got over 300 comments with some very detailed complaints, and I've summarized them for today's video into... Well, I've actually got like 20 separate issues with Windows. I'm not sure if we'll get to all of them, but there's a lot of problems that people have brought up, some of them that I find very frustrating. So yeah, we're going to have a bit of a rant about Microsoft. But before we do that, how are you doing? How's things going in the world of testing PCs?
Yep, all is well here. Building a few new PCs, have some sort of different content coming up. Obviously, still B850 motherboard stuff ongoing. Hoping to get that out in the next week or so. Some of it's been, just getting it done on my end. Other things, there's been delays and stuff like that. So had some problems with a few boards. We got the new MSI M Power board. Finally got that done and tested now. And then Sapphire launched new boards, and there's been a bit of a delay in getting some of those boards in, but I have got some of them in. I've tested them. Anyway, it is weeks away at this point. But obviously a big content piece, a lot of time and effort has to go into that one. Yeah, other than that, all's well.
Well, that's nice. We can get into some rants then, because I think when it comes to things like Windows, I've been pretty frustrated with how things have been going on the front of like the quality of Windows as an operating system. And I feel like over time, Microsoft has just been doing a pretty poor job of maintaining Windows, and it just gets worse and worse. And this came out recently because... there's so many issues with it that we'll get into, but there's just small things now that trigger me bad when it comes to Windows. I think like a couple of weeks ago, there was like a Windows update or something. I clicked update and shut down because it was a PC that it's not like my main PC where it doesn't really matter if it just restarts or goes to sleep. I think this was the computer I use for filming monitor B-roll. So it's in the main set, doesn't need to be used all the time. Run some updates. Update and shut down makes a lot of sense, right? Click update and shut down, doesn't shut down. It restarts the PC. And I'm like, so this feature doesn't work properly. Like, it's advertised to do one thing. It explicitly does not do that. It just doesn't work. And so that got me thinking about all the other annoying frustrations that we can rant about when it comes to Microsoft and the current Windows experience. Now, we've talked about this on the Q&A before as well, and I feel like you are also not the greatest fan of how Windows is currently. So what are your sort of general thoughts?
Yeah, I think mine are probably going to be very similar to everybody else who uses it on a daily basis. I've read through quite a few of the complaints and notes you have here, and I haven't found one that I don't agree with, and I haven't found one that I don't wholeheartedly agree with. So I think we're all pretty much on the same page. And yeah, like you were talking about with the update and stuff, there's just even just personal sort of experiences. Like we had that streaming PC. We built a PC specifically for streaming on the main channel, which admittedly we don't do a lot of, but we just set it up, and it was sort of a set and forget thing, set OBS up, don't really bother updating or changing any settings, because how long it takes us to set all those camera angles up and get all that working. Yeah. So it was a set and forget, never touch it. And every time we turn it on, Windows has changed like the order of the audio devices or what's pulling from where. And it's not OBS. Like OBS is, we've told that not to update. It's just, it's locked in as it is. We don't plug things in differently. The hardware doesn't change. But every time we turn it on, because it's once every 3 to 6 months, it'll boot up, do some Windows update or something, and it manages to screw everything up, and we spend a good 30 minutes trying to reconfigure and work out, why is it not getting the audio from this now? And you'll find that it's done, I can't remember the examples. I know you've dug through those 4 different sound menus to find the one option that it's enabled something that's broken something. It's like, why did it even do that? So that sort of stuff's really annoying. You can't just set stuff up and have it work. It's always needing ongoing maintenance and reconfiguring because it just decides to change things for no reason. So that's just one
Yeah.
of the many annoying things.
I find that very frustrating because I've this podcast PC that I'm filming this on right now. Like sometimes we're just trying to go live, or not live, but we're trying to record the
Mhm,
podcast. I fire it up and just like the camera just doesn't work.
mhm.
And it's not like I've updated the firmware or anything on any of the devices. As you say, it's exactly the same. Windows update happened and suddenly something is reconfigured, or like the primary audio device is now like an HDMI thing instead of through the default thing that it was previously. It's like it's a piece of software. How hard is it to remember exactly what the previous configuration was
Mm.
and apply that same configuration afterwards? Like, we're not talking like there's thousands of audio devices. There's like 3 or 4.
It just
Just
changes it.
why does it change it? So
I think it just
anyway,
likes trolling.
oh,
It's like
man.
I set my keybinds in a game 6 years ago. Like I can even go back to my StarCraft account and all of my keybinds and everything are the same. Could you imagine if just like once every few weeks, like, oh, we're going to change a couple and you don't find out until you're mid-game, you're like, why is it not doing the thing? And it's just because it
Yeah.
randomly changed. But that's what we run into. Like we'll fire up the stream and then one of the channels doesn't have audio. It's just trolling stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, that's very annoying. So we'll start with issue number 1, which I've written down, which is the requirement to use a Microsoft account. Now, this isn't a huge issue. I think once you install or add your Microsoft account, it doesn't seem to do a whole lot. It doesn't really make the experience worse to have the Microsoft account there. It just seems completely unnecessary. Like,
Mhm.
I was thinking when people were mentioning this in the comments that we got, it was, what is the actual user getting? Like, what are you getting when you add a Microsoft account to Windows? Like, normally when you're asked to provide an account or do something, it's for a purpose. Like,
Data
you have,
mining.
well, that's exactly what Microsoft is doing, right? But normally you have an account and it like your Google account, it stores your emails. It
Mhm.
allows you to access Google Drive. On Windows, because you don't actually need a Microsoft account for anything the operating system is doing, you add it and it doesn't do anything. Like it syncs, okay, yeah, it can sync your optional things like Office and OneDrive and whatever, but actually using the core Windows experience,
Mhm.
you do not need a Microsoft account. And so the fact that they've made it so much harder to use local user accounts is pretty annoying, especially because they keep deleting the methods that you could use to get around making local accounts during the setup process, making it harder and harder for people to do this. And we're talking about, and again, this is going to come up many times, Windows is a paid operating system. It's not free. You
Mm.
do spend money. It's currently $139 MSRP for US dollars for Windows 11 Home. It's paid. So why do you need this data mining account installed on your computer when it's a paid thing? You should just be able to use it without having a Microsoft account. So I'm assuming you think similar with that.
Oh, 100% agree. And the reason for it, we are aware the reason is to make more money. They're maximizing profits. They're a greedy corporation. Just selling you the product that they have initially intended on selling you is no longer enough. They have to maximize the amount of money they make for that product. So, we've seen this happen with all kinds of different industries and whatnot. And the big problem here is they have no competition. So they can
Mm.
really get away with doing whatever they want, which is why the experience continues to offer you less. It gets worse and it requires more from you rather than making your life easier.
I think when it comes to us as PC hardware testers as well, like the whole Microsoft account thing can make the actual testing process more difficult because I, for example, across all test systems, use local accounts because that's what makes sense. But if you have a Microsoft account, it can start syncing settings, which I
Mhm.
think is one of the problems that we have as well with Microsoft accounts and some of the setting changes that we've talked about previously. Is that you don't want settings necessarily synced between all of your different test systems, which are configured to use that specific hardware or that specific configuration. So having everything synced in that way can actually hurt what we're trying to do. And so by making that more difficult, even like even if you get the pro version of Windows or whatever, this is still an issue. And I would have thought that the pro version is for professional users.
Mhm.
And so that would mean that you don't necessarily need these more casual user, let's data mine the casual sort of experiences. But no, that's still an issue for other users as well, which I find, super annoying.
Yeah, well, the login thing sucks. We saw it with GeForce Experience for a long time. It was the number one gripe with that particular piece of software for many users. And again, I get that for a lot of people, if they just sign in once and whatever and forget about it, not a big deal. But that's where it becomes, again, annoying for testing or people who do upgrade or change stuff often. Having to re-sign into that unnecessarily sucked. So that's why I much prefer the NVIDIA app, even if it's, they've been slow to build out the features on that compared to what the GeForce Experience had. But yeah, just the unnecessary sign in, the data mining thing's just garbage.
The search bar is probably the thing that I find the most irritating. I think this is the worst feature in Windows, and I actually think the way that it currently works is disgraceful, given it's such a core feature of the operating system, and surely isn't that hard to get right. So this is probably the biggest complaint that we got across all of the user comments, was the search bar just flat out not working.
It's not even a feature. It's not a feature in the sense that I've never used it because it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
So it's not something that I think Windows has built in. So if I need to search for something, it's done in more of a manual fashion, or I use other tools to achieve those goals. But Windows by default doesn't have something that you can search for applications, files, or whatever information. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, the main issue that most people brought up, which is something I think everyone that's used Windows currently experiences, is, first of all, it often just doesn't find things that are known to be on your computer. Like, you install an application, you search for that application by its name, and it doesn't find it.
It gives you like the Windows Store version. Like, would you like to install it? It's like, no, I want to use the one I installed.
I often find that it, especially if you've updated an application, you search for it, it'll find the old version that it's just uninstalled with a shortcut that if you click on says the app isn't installed. And it's like, but I just updated it. So you've obviously deleted the old version, installed the new version, but then search is just like, let's point you to shortcuts that don't exist. I think the big complaint that I have is that often you'll be searching for something, you'll type in your application or file or whatever, you click enter because you've entered the full name of the application perfectly, and then it will take you to a Bing search. Why does the Microsoft Windows search take you to Bing? It should never do that, ever. If I want to search the web, I'll use a web browser. That's what a web browser is for searching things on the internet. The Windows search should be for searching things on the operating system, applications, files, settings. Does anyone want the feature where it takes you to Bing?
I wouldn't have thought so. I certainly don't. But again, I just don't even use it because it's that bad. I can't remember the amount of times I've heard that they've improved and optimized the Windows search feature with like an update and it's going to work now and be better, and it just ends up somehow being worse. That's the thing that's happened, all right? I swear that's happened a lot.
Yep. I find it as well annoying when you're typing in a file or application or something and it shows you the thing that you're looking for. So you move the mouse to go click it, then it changes and removes the thing that you were trying to click on and changes it to a Bing search or something else, so that by the time you click on it, it's taken you to something else entirely. So
this series is about ways in which Microsoft deliberately trolls its users. I think that's where we're heading with this.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Bing thing comes from, and this is a problem I have with Microsoft as a company in general, is it feels very much like everyone's trying to have their little piece of Windows. Like the Bing team is working on Bing and they're like, oh, cool, we've made Bing, right? How do we get people to use Bing? Well, we're not just going to do the normal way, which is make Bing search great so people want to use it. What we're going to do is we're going to boost our numbers artificially by annoying people into using it, by doing some malicious malware-like installations of Bing. Because I would love to know the percentage of Bing searches that come from people using Windows search and finding the wrong thing and accidentally clicking through to Bing. Like, that's got to be boosting their numbers and boosting their bonuses that they get from, numbers or whatever.
I'm still just laughing on my head and stuck on the fact that imagine saying that you're from the Bing team.
You probably want to hide that fact, wouldn't you?
I mean, it's embarrassing in on itself, but then it just sounds like think of a nerdier thing you could possibly say than I'm from the Microsoft Bing team.
Mm.
Anyway, not to fixate on that, but yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I don't think there's too much that needs to be unpacked about the Windows search bar being garbage and slow and inefficient and generally just not working.
Yeah, they pretty much need to go back to square one on that one and just redo the whole thing from scratch. Just
Well,
fully fix it.
I don't think that's the problem. I think they can fix it. I think they can make it work. It's that they want it to be a feature and do a thing that you don't want it to do, I guess is the problem. And I think that's probably going to be the theme for a lot of this stuff. Microsoft are wanting these things to do something that you don't want them to do. So it's not that they're necessarily incompetent or can't make a good search. I'm sure they can. I just think it's that they don't want to.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think they want, we go down to some of the things like annoying pop-ups and splash screens that try and force you to use Microsoft apps that you don't want. Like, surely they know that users don't like splash screens and annoying pop-ups. Like, no one's like, hey, I wish my operating system today would show me a pop-up or splash screen when I open it up. Like, no one wants that. They know that no one wants that feature. And yet they just do it because they're like, okay, this is going to give us more clicks onto Edge or more clicks onto Copilot or more clicks onto OneDrive or whatever. And I honestly feel like, how when you open up your PC and you're like, I don't really want to use Edge because I'm a Chrome user. Like, that's what I've used. It's where all my, I've got all my extensions or whatever that I like using. I just want to install Chrome. It's nothing against Edge, but I prefer using Chrome. So you go into Edge to download Chrome, and boy, does Microsoft whinge and beg at you. They really get annoyed and salty at you for not using Edge. And I think, as I've written in the notes here, that is actually pretty pathetic from Microsoft. It's pretty pathetic that they need to beg you and whinge at you for using another application because you've bought Windows.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've paid for the software. It doesn't actually matter whether you use Edge or not. Like, obviously from Microsoft's side, they care because they want the telemetry and all that from using Edge.
Mm-hmm.
But from a user perspective, it doesn't matter whether you use Chrome or Edge on Windows. That's a user choice. So to then have all these really pathetic whinges at you that you're using an alternate version of software in the operating system, it's pretty disgraceful. Because you're not replacing core functionality. The whole point of the operating system is to allow you to use apps and then to have a sook at you for when you're trying to use another app. That is not what an operating system should be doing. And it's the same with all of the pop-ups and things like, here's Game Pass. Like, how many times have you seen like a pop-up splash screen when you load Windows after an update or whatever? It's like, Game Pass. Do you want Game Pass at a discount? If I didn't do it the first time, I'm probably not interested in it the second or third or fourth or fifth time that you've shown me the splash screen. So why do you keep showing? Like, it's not a core feature of the operating system. It's an optional subscription service. Why are you showing me pop-ups for this in the operating system? Like, maybe on a website, like if you go to xbox.com or something, show you that. Or maybe in the Microsoft store, you could have, you load up a game and it could say, instead of buying this game, you could subscribe to Game Pass and get access to this game. That's fine. But splash screens in the operating system? Like, are we serious here? I've paid for this software.
I like how it'd be funny going like 10, 15 years into the future and watching your grievances with Windows 11. And then they're like, oh, Tim, this was before wallpapers. You could have wallpapers with Windows 11. Now they're, dynamic advertisements that whenever you go to your desktop, there's a different ad there and you can't change that. I joke, of course, but I also shudder to think at what the future might hold with that sort of stuff. Because essentially you are talking about, with these splash screens, they're just advertisements. They're trying to advertise services and features to you to get you to buy them.
I know you're sort of joking about the wallpaper thing, but I mean,
sort of.
People have paid for various different services over the years, whether it's like, those Amazon screen devices or Google TV things. Like, I've got a Google TV and now there's ads in it. Like, it used to not have ads on the home screen. Now it has ads on the home screen. And I've paid for this. Like, it is hardware I've given my money to. I can understand if it's a free service that there's going to have to be some sort of advertising or monetization component. And usually when things are free, right, it's you, the user, is sort of the product. Like they're making money off you and giving your data or your eyeballs to see ads. But when I've paid for something, I've handed money over, I feel like that's sort of what it used to be an agreement where I pay for service, you give me service, you don't annoy me with ads. And now that's just not the case. So that annoys me greatly.
Yeah, well, generally those things start out with competition, which means they actually have to make a good service to win customers over. I mean, Amazon did the same sort of thing, even with, retail sales. And then once they crush the competition and they end up with a monopoly like what Microsoft has, then all bets are off. You're getting shafted 10 different ways at that point because they don't need to try and offer you a good service anymore, which is exactly, this is what we're seeing here.
The right-click menu is one of the things that they've sort of degraded for seemingly no reason.
Painful.
Previously,
it's one of the worst things about Windows 11 by far for me.
Yeah, it's very, very annoying, which is why it came pretty high up in this list. Previously, you click right-click, shows you all the options. Now, for some reason, right-click shows you half the options, and then you have to click more options to get the rest of the options. Why they've done this on a desktop platform, I don't know. It's not a screen real estate thing. I've got plenty of screen real estate to show all the options. So why they feel the need to hide some of the stuff, I've got no idea. It makes no sense to me. I can't figure it out. It obviously should be reverted immediately. It's just dumb.
Yeah. So we're aware that you can change that using, third-party software. So I've put back the classic menus and the classic start button, start menu on my desktop PC. I actually haven't done it on my gaming PC because, I barely use that. I click on the game and go play. But so we're aware it's something you can work around, and a lot of these things through third-party software can be addressed, but then you have to install or pay for a heap of different software to fix stuff that should just be basic functionality. So I guess that's the main grievance here. And it's
like
the
pay
fact
for
that
third-party software to fix basic functionality. Come on, that's disgraceful. Shouldn't need to do that.
Not even that. When you first right-click, you end up with this sort of, I guess what's meant to be, I'll give them credit, like it's meant to be a more user-friendly, more organized, aesthetically pleasing menu. I don't know. I'm going out on a limb here. I'm trying to give them some credit for what they've tried to accomplish here, but it's just basically a simplified, worse version of a thing that all Windows users were familiar with. And then when you click the show more options, it just loads the original menu. It's not like the new stylish menu, but in the old menu format or with the old menu features or options. It's just, here's the new menu. And if you want the actual old useful menu, click show more options. And then we load the old menu.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem with Windows 11 period. Because it's like, if you want to go change networking settings and you go to the search and you type in network, you get the new network panel where you can't do a lot of stuff. And then to open the old network connection one, you often have to go to a different thing. And it's two menus that are both for your network connections, but they're totally different. And you get that with display and stuff and some of the older features, like I suppose screensavers and all that.
Yeah, it's crazy that they've still to this day, it seems like they've been working on this for I don't know how many years, at least a decade, trying to unify the settings, and they still haven't managed to put everything in the same menu. So you have to keep opening, the settings screen and then open sub menus, and then sometimes it opens other apps to do different settings. And even for things like, Windows HDR calibration, that's not even in the settings. You have to download a Microsoft Store app to do that. It's like, why isn't that in the settings?
So it's even like what we were talking about earlier with the sound stuff. I can't remember recently you and I had some sound issue, and in the main new sound menu, the stuff we needed wasn't there. So then you find the old sound menu, and then it's the setting that it enabled was like 3 sub menus deep that we had to go looking for to find. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah, I get trying to simplify things for users, but how is what you've just described a simple thing for end users? Having to go 3 or 4 menus deep across different applications to find settings, especially because the search in the settings barely works. But if it did work, you'd hope that you could search for various different things and actually it would take you to those things within the search app, but it just, because it's all over the place, there's no guarantee that you'll actually find what you're looking for.
And it's not more user-friendly because half the time this new headset or whatever you've installed has either enabled an option or Windows has enabled an option for it that's like wrecking your audio in one way or another, or it's making your microphone gain really low. And so you go into the system sound menu, which is pretty basic. You got to scroll all the way down to advanced. There's a heap of like random confusing stuff there. And then you got to click more sound settings, which just loads the old sound panel, which has everything that you were previously looking at plus the stuff you actually need. And it's just insane. Like,
Yeah.
So
how have they not fixed that?
They've definitely made it more complicated than it was, and arguably less powerful.
Yeah, it's like, why? This is the same thing with the right click. Like, both these things are related, right? Why is there an option to show more options that gives you the same options plus more options? Like, if you've made a menu that sort of admits that they can show you all the options in the one thing, why have they split it off? And I remember with the right click menu at the top, there used to be just icons for things like, especially in Windows Explorer, like cut, copy, rename, delete, the sort of basic functions. And then even for me, like, I sort of know what a lot of the icons mean, but sometimes, you get a bit confused, like, oh yeah, which one was copy or which one was, rename? Like, sometimes you accidentally click the copy icon instead of the rename icon, because copy is a shortcut, rename doesn't. So you kind of need to use rename. And so eventually Microsoft just conceded that only having icons is dumb. And so now the current version has the text and the icons, which, like, the interface, the right click interface where it's got the basic functions at the top with icons and headings is fine. That's a good interface that makes it easier for people. But then why not show all the rest of the options beneath that in sort of a unified, nicer looking, modern version of the show more options menu? Like, why can't they? Why they're not able to do that makes no sense to me. It's just a stupid feature. So let's move on to the next thing, which is, and this sort of relates to this pop-ups and splash screens and stuff, is also pre-installing bloatware into the Windows operating system. Again, it's a paid software. I don't need links for Candy Crush, pre-installed on my operating system out of the box.
Well, don't lie to me. I know you love Candy Crush. Could you give like a relevant example?
I love Candy Crush. I could, if you told me right now, describe the game Candy Crush, I definitely could, but don't test me on that because we don't have time in the podcast. I would get it right though.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the fact that Microsoft also allows OEMs to install garbage in what I would think of as sort of an antivirus scam where they pre-install like, a month or 2 months of antivirus software, and then it expires and they pretend your PC is unsafe now because Norton antivirus has run out, and like all OEMs do that. Surely Microsoft could prevent that from happening as well, but that's more of an OEM thing to get annoyed at.
Yeah, it's one of the least egregious things that Microsoft does.
Yep.
It's a third party thing, but yeah, totally that sucks for sure. It's the worst thing about pre-built systems, right? Or one of the worst things.
Yeah, that's why if we're recommending desktop pre-built to people, we tend to recommend from boutique system builders or people that do a proper job of that stuff that don't usually install that sort of bloatware. We've talked a bit about the settings stuff. Another thing that I'll bring up as well is that sometimes the setting app just crashes. How you could have a setting app that crashes is beyond me. It's one of the most important utilities in the entire operating system. Should not crash ever. And I'm sure it's possible. Like it can't be that buggy. Like you go back to Windows XP or Windows 7, how often did the settings app crash? Like never. And now the settings app crashes sometimes, especially for display settings. It happens to me once or twice a month, just doesn't load, have to reset the whole PC.
Okay.
Stupid. Yeah, we talked a little bit about making modern versions of Windows utilities that are slower and worse. So things like the settings app, pretty much one of those utilities that they've used to be simple, unified. Now it's worse, split into multiple versions, slower to use. And this applies to a lot of the other default stuff that's included across the operating system. They have improved some things, like Windows Explorer now has tabs and things like that. The task manager does have additional functionality that wasn't there previously, but a lot of other stuff has certainly got more difficult to use. The next one, though, is a really big annoyance for me. Probably right up there with right-clicking of the menus and the search bar not working. And that's Microsoft heavily integrating optional services into the operating system. I'm specifically thinking here of OneDrive. So OneDrive is fully integrated into Windows Explorer, and I believe by default it replaces like your documents, pictures, folders with like cloud synced OneDrive versions. So it's automatically uploading those things to the cloud and isn't necessarily storing them locally on your PC, depending on the configuration that you're using, of course. But then even worse is that if you don't use OneDrive, so if, for example, you revert to local documents folders or you're in Microsoft Office or whatever and you're just saving things to your computer, Microsoft pretends that your PC is not backed up. It's not secure. You know, if you disable OneDrive and you go into this little securities thing, it says, "Hey, here's a little, triangle icon, yellow with a little exclamation point in there. Your PC's unsafe."
Mhm.
Huh? Why is that? I'm using the default operating system. What's wrong? Is something wrong with Windows Defender? No, it's because I'm not backing up my files on OneDrive. But I am because I installed Google Drive onto my system and it's backing up all my files. But of course, because that's not a Microsoft service, they don't know. And so they're effectively gaslighting you into thinking that your PC is not secure or backed
Microsoft's
up.
like, they're like, please stop doing that. Use OneDrive.
Well, it's the same thing as Edge, right? It's
Yeah.
it's an optional feature. Backing up stuff to OneDrive. OneDrive's a Microsoft service. It's optional. It's not part of the operating system, or shouldn't be a default part of the operating system, because you can choose many different services to do this for you. And so when you use a third-party thing like Google Drive or many of the other utilities that can do this for you, or you could even set up your own server and do it.
Mhm.
It then pretends that you've got an unsecure, not backed up PC when you don't use OneDrive, which I know better, but like an end
That's
user
right.
may not.
Yeah. I think that's important to note that. First of all, OneDrive can be easily removed, though getting to the add and remove programs through the search is another very difficult thing. You got to type add or
Yeah.
and then it will come up. Otherwise, it doesn't come up.
But don't get me started on how many times you search for sound in the settings and it doesn't show you the sound settings, or audio and it shows you something else. It's like,
so as soon as you install Windows, you can remove OneDrive. It's a quick uninstall and then it's gone and you're done with it. So that at least is a quick and easy fix. Alternatively, you can, which is more of an enthusiast thing, but you can edit your Windows installation so it removes a lot of this bloat and garbage prior, like as you install Windows, this never gets installed. So it's also possible to make a custom, bootable USB that won't install stuff like OneDrive. So those things can, in a way, be solved, unlike some of the other stuff we've talked about. And then even then, some of that can be solved with third-party software. But the fact that it's, installed by default and is very annoying is the underlying problem.
And this goes into the Microsoft account thing as well, because the only reason Microsoft knows that you've got OneDrive is potentially because you've signed into your Microsoft account, which may have Office 365 subscription or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's like, hey, nice, you're a Microsoft user. Now we're going to fully integrate all of the Microsoft stuff everywhere. Isn't that great? Like, you may only have Microsoft 365 to use Excel, but I'm sure you use all the features that we offer. And so now we're going to just do that in the operating system automatically. So that's nice. Windows updates hurting performance is one that we've talked about extensively on the Hardware Unbox channel before, because this has happened with the Ryzen situation, for example, where Windows updates drastically change the performance. And by drastic, I mean like a 10% gaming performance difference, which is pretty significant within an operating system change. And just the lack of focus in general on optimizing the operating system for performance. And they've kind of done these sort of game mode things like, how often do we hear about the next version of Windows has another gaming specific mode that's going to improve performance and optimize the experience for gaming to give you the best experience? And then you turn it on and it does absolutely nothing.
Yeah, there's a heap of annoying stuff around that. For example, if you change your Ryzen CPU from one Ryzen CPU to another Ryzen CPU, you might see the expected performance, or it might run like crap. It could even be unstable, which is why we always recommend a fresh install, even when changing from like one Ryzen CPU to another if it's of a different architecture. But even then, it can be the same architecture. It can be that the CCD layout is different, like there's two CCDs instead of one. That can cause scheduling issues, which sometimes a fresh install will solve. So basically, a lot of configuration issues there. And again, software like DDU has become so widely used because Windows, and just, I guess you can blame AMD and NVIDIA to a degree, but just clearing out those older drivers and getting fresh drivers can be difficult, and that can cause stability and performance related problems. So I just don't know. Surely there's a way that Windows can be a bit more flexible in the way that it handles upgrades and stuff like that. I feel like if you're going maybe from Intel to AMD, that's a significant change, and it's difficult to reconfigure the OS correctly there. Not sure. But yeah, I have seen problems when going from like a 6-core Ryzen CPU to an 8-core Ryzen CPU. Like, it almost always needs to do a fresh install to ensure that it's working correctly. So that's just pretty janky, really. I feel like they could do a better job of that.
I'm sure it's possible to have some sort of reconfiguration process occur once they detect a CPU change. And I mean, we're talking about Microsoft has been able to go through and add features like Copilot into the operating system, which obviously would have taken some effort, or integrate OneDrive or any of the other annoying things that we've been talking about. But they can't dedicate any time to things like ensuring that the upgrade, like the hardware upgrading process, is better and is giving you the optimal performance out of the box. Like, I'm sure Microsoft is aware that people don't want to be doing fresh installs of their operating system if they can at all avoid it. If you're doing hardware upgrades on a desktop PC, you generally want to try and avoid doing that. But and I guess if they know that, switching from an AMD to an Intel CPU, or even upgrading within the same processor family, gives you performance issues or something like that, surely they could come up with some sort of, annoying splash screen that runs the first time you do that, and then does some sort of process of cleaning out drivers, or, changing these sort of configurations, which I mean, if there is a performance difference, you're doing a fresh install, there must be something that is configured during that installation process to set up your PC to be used with that processor. And so why can't they have some utility that does that again when it detects a hardware change? Or if you switch from an AMD to an NVIDIA graphics card, you get there's a utility included that's like, hey, we've detected that your GPU is different. To get the optimal performance, you need to click this button, which will remove all the old drivers and set up your PC to install the new drivers. But no, we need third-party software to do that. And that's the things that Microsoft's not doing, while they are doing stuff that makes the operating system worse for users, like breaking search all the time, or changing the right-click menu, or integrating OneDrive. And so, especially for this, gaming-focused systems, I would have thought that they would, we're about to talk about mining of user data. They're mining all this user data. Surely they know how often people are using DDU or switching out graphics cards or doing upgrades, and should make that process better and more streamlined for users so that people can get the best performance out of their Windows PC.
Yeah, they're just not incentivized to do that, which is why they don't do it. If there's a way for them to make money out of people using DDU, or a feature like that, then it would absolutely have that feature. And it's frustrating because if they put time and resources into that sort of stuff to the same sort of degree that they did adding Copilot, for example, they'd probably learn a lot more about the operating system and be able to address a lot of issues and just make it fundamentally better than it is, because they would be spending time and resources optimizing and improving the operating system rather than adding junk to it to exploit their users.
And I feel like the mining of user data issue goes into all of this, because like, I wouldn't say I'm a person that overly cares about having my user telemetry sent to Microsoft. Like, I'd rather it doesn't happen, but it's not high on the list of grievances that I have with Windows.
They're just going to be like, wow, this guy plays a lot of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. That's unusual.
Yeah, so I get the privacy angle. I don't want to minimize people saying, that this is a big issue for them and they want a private experience on the operating system. I think all of that's fair. What I find annoying about this is that if you're going to be mining my user data, at least use it usefully. Like, if you're going to get the information of what I'm doing on my PC, actually improve the operating system with that information.
Mhm.
Like if you know
Yeah, I don't think that's the
that,
goal
well,
somehow.
it's not. It's not the goal, right? But if you know that a lot of people constantly click in the right click menu on the show more options button,
Mhm.
surely this mining of my user data and mining of all of your user data watching this podcast or listening to this podcast so they know that you are doing that, you are clicking that button thousands of
And
times.
so what they do with that information is they go, the show more options button is the most clicked button on the first menu. That is excellent information. And that has worked exactly as intended, because now when it says show more options, what we're going to do is it's going to show you a brief ad and then show you more
Yes.
options. and
Or
they're like, mark that down as optimized.
yeah, you know what else they would consider doing is that everyone's been trained right that the show more options button is the last option in the menu. So
Mhm.
what they'll do is they'll put a Copilot button there and they'll move show more options up one notch.
Yeah.
So you know how often apps do this is like there's a button that you use all the time that's in a really nice and convenient place, and then they'll put their garbage feature that they want to promote into that prime position that you have muscle memory for using, and then shift the other thing just slightly.
Yeah.
That pisses me off so much.
They're only ever so slightly removed from when you go and set Chrome as the default and it has like that blue button. Like, are you sure you want to do this? And you got to click yes. And as you go to click, yes jumps to the other side. It's like, no. That's how close they are to fully trolling us.
Yeah.
It's not far off.
Honestly, doing that stuff again is pathetic and embarrassing.
Mhm.
Like it's just, if you need to do that sort of thing to get people to use your features, you're just embarrassing yourself. But yeah, like the mining of user data shouldn't be happening in a paid operating system, in my opinion. You've paid for the software. You are not the product. You have paid for the product. So the user data should not be a thing. And again, if they were going to do it, I think people would be more accepting of this if it went to improving the operating system. And if they were giving evidence of things like, hey guys, we've noticed that a lot of you do this feature or find this thing hard to do. And so we have improved this with the future version of the operating system. Like the data might say 80% of people keep clicking the show more options button in the right click menu. So we've unified the menu now. So you can just see all your options there. That would make you think, oh, they kind of know what's happening in the operating system and they're improving it. But no, they're just doing it so that they can make money off your data and integrate stuff that you don't want. Because I'm sure they when they see that I'm using Google Drive, they're like, okay, we need to push OneDrive integration harder and use more ads to get you to use OneDrive instead. Let's talk about Copilot. Obviously, the AI features integrating Copilot all over the place is annoying. It's pretty easy to remove, as you said previously. You don't have to use it, but they're certainly trying their hardest to make you use it. It by default has an icon on the taskbar once you install Windows in the default way. It's obviously integrated into an app and all that sort of thing. And again, it's an optional feature, so it really shouldn't be integrated into the operating system. At least as far as I'm aware, when you click on Copilot, it effectively just launches like a chat application. It's not exactly deeply integrated into the operating system in a way where it's making your life easier by doing AI stuff for you in the background. It's really just an app that you chat to and it does stuff sometimes.
It's like a panic. Oh, we need to do AI stuff or we won't be relevant. Just like every single corporation's knee-jerk reaction to AI. But yeah, that's something I zap straight away. So not using that crap.
Yep, just delete it. I know they added Copilot buttons to PCs. Again, I think that's kind of stupid, desperate move, embarrassing.
It's like it's the 2025 turbo button.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I just feel like anything that is trying to get people to use their features in a way that is probably more likely to be an accident than a purposeful use of that feature is just very embarrassing. Like as a software developer or a Windows developer, you should be extremely embarrassed about the Copilot button on the keyboard. Because if that's what's necessary to get people to use Copilot, like I would understand this if they made Copilot and it was awesome. Like
and
people
were like, can we have a Copilot button? Do you reckon anyone ever asked for that?
No.
Okay. And do you reckon anyone ever's like, oh, I never asked for that. I didn't think I would need that, but I'm so thankful that I have that.
There's no chance.
Okay, good.
There is no
we need
chance.
To find that person.
They put that button there so that they could sell AI PCs.
I think
That's
you're
the
wrong.
reason.
I reckon there's at least one member of the Microsoft Bing team that's pretty stoked about that button.
I'm sure the Copilot team's very stoked. They're like, yes.
I don't even know if they are. It's probably more likely a Bing member. Oh.
I'm not sure. In any case, having to be that desperate to get people to use features is embarrassing. Don't do it. Wait for feedback. And then if people are super stoked about your awesome feature that you actually made good, you've spent time and effort making it good, then you put the button in maybe, but not first. That's just desperation.
On next week's podcast, Tim will be interviewing a member of the Copilot team at Microsoft.
Look,
so
if Microsoft employees might be listening to this podcast and they might be getting very upset that I'm calling a lot of their feature integrations embarrassing and, disgusting and stuff like that. It's like, well, get good. Make the operating system better and I won't call your stuff embarrassing. Like the begging to use Edge is genuinely the most embarrassing thing a software company has probably ever done on the PC platform.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So updates, re-enabling settings or reinstalling bloatware applications. We've sort of talked about this a little bit. Just updates changing things for no reason. The update button not working. As I've mentioned earlier, the update and shutdown thing just straight up not working, or at least not working for a large number of people from the poll that we did a while back. This is just something that should be easy to fix. Updates should not change settings or reinstall bloatware apps.
I think it's annoying as well where updates often roll back. Like you'll wait 20, 30 minutes for them to install or roll back because it didn't like a thing. And then you have to go hunting around. It's like it didn't like the time and date the computer was set to, or it didn't like one setting that was enabled or something.
And doesn't tell you.
Yeah, and it just gives you a random error code that means one of 50 things and you have to go work out what one it is and waste a ton of time on that, getting your paid software to actually update. So that, for me, that's one of the bigger gripes I've had with the updates. Or, the update just breaking the computer entirely, resulting in blue screens of death. That's happened more times than I care to remember.
Yeah, and I know Windows is installed on a large selection of hardware, so it's a pretty difficult situation to try and make it updates work across absolutely everyone's configuration.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably for a company the size of Microsoft, they could do a better job of that. Obviously, garbage HDR has been an issue for a while now. It's not very seamless. Requires a lot of switching between SDR and HDR. Dolby Vision is really bad. And as I mentioned before, the HDR calibration tool, it's a pretty essential thing for a lot of applications and games. It's not even part of the settings. You have to install a third-party app. Makes absolutely no sense why they couldn't integrate that into Windows when they're integrating Copilot, OneDrive, Candy Crush, HDR calibration tool, not part of the OS. Don't know what that's about.
Well, they haven't found a way to monetize it.
Yeah, put ads in it or something.
Well,
make the little things, when you have to I don't know whether you've ever used the app, but there's a lot of here's two images that you have to match based on the settings of your monitor. Instead of making that just like a white screen, they could make that an ad for Copilot, like a Copilot icon. Try and match the
Look, it sounds
movements.
silly, but I think if you can come up with ways that Microsoft think they can make money from HDR or whatever, or monetize that in one way or another, then they will almost certainly throw much more development resources at that. But the reason why HDR implementation is garbage and why it sucks is because they haven't thought of a way or haven't found a way to make money from it. So they're not excited about it. That's it.
Something that a lot of people brought up in the comments was Microsoft's insistence of reminding you in 3 days or reminding you in 30 days or postponing various different annoying pop-ups or updates instead of just being able to click a never show me this again.
I hate that so much as well, yeah.
Absolute garbage. It's so often I fire up the PC after an update or something and again, splash screen. Don't ever do splash screens. They're annoying. It comes up and it's like, you haven't finished your setup. Now I'm going, pretty sure I finished the setup when I, installed this operating system to begin with, and it took me to the
3 years ago.
I installed this 3 or 4 years ago. It took me to the desktop. That means I finished the setup. Mm-hmm. Now you're telling me I haven't finished the setup because I haven't done some OneDrive BS or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, you're telling me that there's just a remind me button. There's no never show me this, never show me a splash screen. It's always just, we'll show that to you again in a little bit of time from now. You're going to see this again and you're going to be very mad about it, but we're never giving you the option to get rid of it. Same with updates. If you need a PC to never update, good luck. You have to go right deep into the settings and change group policy stuff to make sure that you can disable updates. These days is just, I think you can postpone it by up to 30 days maximum. That's it. That's just garbage. Like especially pro version stuff, like I've bought this software, just let me use it how I want to use it. If I want to be not secure by not running updates or whatever, which I'm sure is the reason that they use for forcing you to update, just let me have the choice. Some of my systems don't need necessarily to have updates done, especially when it gets to that 30 days. It's like you have to update your PC now. You can't postpone it anymore or whatever. And then it takes forever. Then it might roll back, as you were saying, or some sort of crucial thing like, oh, I just need to get on and record a podcast or something. But now Windows updates. And then maybe previously when I hit update and shut down, which it didn't shut down, and it didn't shut down because it rolled back the update, but I never knew that because I just walked away and I wasn't going to use that PC or whatever. Anyway. Janky experience using multi-monitors, not snapping, not working properly, slow UI, especially if you use different resolutions or refresh rates, full screen issues, the operating system not defaulting to the highest refresh rate and resolution makes no sense on modern products. Obviously, it should be defaulting to the highest refresh rate. The amount of times I've told people with gaming monitors, this may be set to 60 hertz by default. You have to up it to 144 or 240 hertz to actually get what you paid for is crazy. The amount of people that didn't know that was a thing, especially casual users, that Microsoft should just be doing that by default at this point.
I get the compatibility concerns, so I'm not too red hot on that one, and it is quick and easy to change. But it is annoying the way that when you do set your monitor to 144 hertz and then you don't even have to update the drivers or something, it just decides one day that you're going back to 60 hertz for reasons. That's probably what annoys me more than the default thing. But that's probably a result of the default because it's reverting back to default because something tripped it up or whatever. So yeah, it's annoying. I guess you don't want a detection, like a false positive detection type issue where it or the inverse of that, like where it thinks you've got a 144 hertz monitor, but you've got a 120 hertz monitor. And it defaults to 144 hertz, and then you get a black screen or something, and then you have to reboot and get into safe mode and change it there. Because I mean, I think I'm recalling this correctly. I'm pretty sure back in the day, if you set the incorrect resolution or whatever, and you didn't revert changes or whatever, I can't remember, but basically you would have to force restart in a safe mode to then change the resolution back down to an. That sounds janky, but I'm pretty sure that's how it used to work like 2 decades ago or 15 years ago, something like that.
That's why we see that countdown thing now where if the screen's black, it sort of counts down. I feel like, again, I do agree that there's a compatibility angle. I feel like, again, this is probably something that Microsoft can solve. When I was talking previously about a detected hardware change, and you could run some sort of thing that sort of optimizes your PC for the hardware change. If Windows detects that you've plugged in a new monitor, they could show you a screen, not an annoying splash screen, a useful screen that is like, you've plugged in a monitor and it's running at 60 hertz. We think this monitor is actually a 240 hertz monitor. Here is the option to change from 60 to 240 hertz. It'll go through that whole, if it goes black, it just reverts over time.
Yeah, that would be a good solution.
That would make sense. Of course, it would require Microsoft to be able to properly detect these things because you don't want to see that splash screen over and over again if you're not changing your monitor. But provided that works properly, so you plug in your monitor once and then it tells you this sort of thing, I think that would benefit a lot of users because, yeah, I agree, they probably can't default to the highest just for compatibility problems, but the amount of people that are just very casual gamers who've bought these nice high refresh monitors and have come to our video on Monitors Unboxed, which is the how to set up your monitor video, and have left comments being like, I didn't know you had to change the refresh rate in Windows.
Which explains comments we saw years ago when people were like, high refresh rate monitors are a scam. I bought one. It's indistinguishable from my 60 hertz monitor. And you and I are sitting there like, what? How? It's not possible. I get that some people aren't as sensitive to others, but it's a night and day difference. And then it occurred to us, years ago that, oh, hang on. Are you actually setting it to, 120, 140 hertz, or is it like 60? I mean, out of all the grievances we have with, Microsoft Windows, I feel like, that's more of a fine tuning, tweaking thing at the end of the day, because the ability to adjust, you can do it from the first menu. You don't even need to show more options. So you can just right click on your desktop, go display settings, scroll down a bit, go advanced display, and click the drop down list to choose your refresh rate. So that's pretty easy. I think the janky experience using multi monitors, and again, this is like the HDR thing. Like they don't make money making the multi monitor experience better, and they have no competition, therefore they don't. But waking my computer up every morning and then having to resize all my windows is just, it's a fun little chore to start the day every single day. Or, right now I've been doing the podcast on my gaming setup. I'll go back to my computer. My 3 monitors will be off. I'll have to move the mouse and it'll all be, my 20 windows that I have open will be randomly all over the place on different screens and whatever. And I have to go find them and move them around. First world problems, I realize that, but pretty annoying and extremely unnecessary. Like there's no way that it can't memorize the pixels of each screen, where things were located before the screens went to sleep, and then reload them in that position. Like I don't feel like that's something difficult to achieve.
It's crazy. And again, going back to the telemetry thing, right? They're collecting all this user data that people complain about. They would know, first of all, what people's maximum refresh rates are on their monitors and whether or not they are using that refresh rate or not. So they would know for sure how many people are not setting the monitor to the highest refresh rate. And they would also know how many people, after their monitors are coming back from sleep, having to resize a whole bunch of application windows. Use the telemetry to improve the operating system. These are, and I'm sure, like, we're not talking about niche little things that, like, maybe 1 or 2 people are having these problems. The thing that you're just talking about with monitors waking up and all the windows going crazy and having to resize them, there would be people listening to this driving home from work going crazy, being like, that frustrates the absolute crap out of me. How have they not fixed that? I can guarantee you there are people just being like, yes, this is the thing that annoys me the most about Windows. These are not uncommon issues. These are major problems affecting a lot of people who use these things, especially for desktops, but this can also affect laptops. People plug second screens into laptops and stuff, and that's more likely to have issues with the resolution mismatching, where if you don't have the same resolution or the same scaling across multiple displays, you move an application across, it does this like really janky, slow resizing. It's just really awful. Surely there's a better way of handling that. I mean, we've got games that can do like crazy 3D stuff these days, and you're telling me I'm dragging a screen, like an application, like a notepad app or Windows Explorer from one screen to another, and it has to do this like awful resized jank. Like, come on, guys. Come on. There's got to be a better way of doing that. Anyway, I mean, yeah, annoying and pointless notifications. Microsoft obviously put a notification panel into Windows. I feel like a lot of those notifications are either just ads for Microsoft features or are largely pointless. I'm sure it can be configured in a way that is actually useful. Like you could probably get emails and stuff into that notification screen in a useful way. I've never found it useful. I've found it more annoying than anything. And I suspect that's because they just allow ads and garbage in there. If it was better curated, it would work a lot better.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure applications like email clients like Thunderbird and stuff do that themselves anyway. Like before there was even a notifications thing, it was part of the application. You could enable or disable it very easily. And I tend to choose to disable that stuff. I don't want that crap popping up all the time. And getting rid of all the notifications is quite a chore. But yeah, it can be done.
Microsoft removing the options to control the position of the taskbar. This is something that came up in the comments by quite a few people, and just making the taskbar experience less user-friendly. So changing the way things are grouped so that it's much more difficult to switch between. For example, you might have different Windows Explorer windows open, but they're all grouped together. Much more difficult in the modern versions of Windows to change between those different folders and stuff like that. They do have obviously tabs and stuff now, which changes it a little bit. But then just, adding bloatware to the taskbar. By default, it adds in a news and weather thing in the bottom left corner.
Yep.
Do people use that?
Some people might, but I think the main problem here is the core issue is the fact that you've lost a lot of the flexibility you have with customizing this sort of stuff. Again, you can install third-party applications to help address that, but
which shouldn't be necessary.
Yeah. It's not necessarily for me what they have or haven't added. It's the fact that you seem to be losing control over a lot of these things. The ability to to change and modify, and just the general flexibility, that the capabilities of it, it's becoming very rigid and very difficult to get it the way you like it. And again, then there's also the thing where there's different menus to do different things, and it just sucks.
Yeah, there's a comment I saw from someone which made a very salient point, I think, which is, the simplification of Windows feels very Mac OS like.
Yeah. Yep.
But if I wanted to use Mac OS, I would have just gone and bought a MacBook or a Mac Mini or a Mac Pro or whatever, because it's not like Apple hardware's bad. Like, Apple is actually a very competent hardware company. The reason why I don't use a Mac is because I'm not a fan of Mac OS. That's the main limiting factor. It's not the hardware. The hardware is fine, right? So if I wanted to use a Mac, that's what I would do. I'm using Windows because that is the operating system that, at least at one point, gave us much more customization options. It was a pro operating system for, pro users who needed to use it for work purposes or productivity or whatever. And this simplification of making things, let's get rid of those customization options you used to have, or make it more difficult, or you have to install third-party apps, is like Mac OSification of the operating system. When, again, if I wanted that, I would just choose to use a Mac. Because if I like that experience, the simplified experience is probably a lot better on a Mac. Which is why they're a successful hardware company, and why a lot of people that want that simple experience do go out and just buy Macs. I'm not buying Windows to get a Mac experience. So yeah, that's annoying. Windows offering driver updates through Windows Update, but never doing this properly, is something that does annoy me. This is probably one of the more minor complaints, but obviously they do offer this via Windows updates. They seem, especially for graphics drivers and chipset drivers and stuff, they don't seem to ever install the latest version for whatever reason. So sometimes it'll be like, oh, there's a new AMD display driver update, and it installs it, but it's not the very latest version you can get from the AMD website or the NVIDIA website. Or sometimes you install the latest version and then it overwrites that via the Windows update thing.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably more problematic than anything. Like, it creates more problems than it solves. They'd be better off just not doing that at all and just leaving it up to the users to go to the AMD or NVIDIA websites to get that stuff. Because I've had problems where I've been installing a driver and then the update's trying to install a driver as well. So that's created a heap of headaches. So yeah, just don't do that, I guess.
I think it makes sense for, I guess, some of the things that you may not update as often, like a Wi-Fi driver or something like that, where you're probably not keeping up to date with the latest Wi-Fi drivers. And that can happen in the background, but I don't really understand the need for NVIDIA or AMD graphics drivers to be part of that process when they have their own update process.
Even then, though, I've had older Ethernet and Wi-Fi drivers installed that have been responsible for dropouts and stability problems and even compatibility problems. So by going and downloading the latest version, it'll address that, and then I don't have the problems. And some users might get those older, outdated, known to have problems drivers that are lacking the fixes of the more updated drivers, and then run into these problems and have no idea what's going on with their system. But had they just gone to the manufacturer or even the product page for their motherboard and installed the latest drivers, they would have avoided all of that.
Yep.
Or Microsoft could have just installed the latest drivers.
Well, that's the thing, is that if you're going to have the feature work. Like, have it install the latest drivers.
So again, coming back to the common theme of all of this.
Yeah, just make it work. I mean, I get that it's meant for people who are not super tech savvy to just have things update nicely in the background. But then if you buy a laptop or a lot of pre-built systems from the main PC makers, they have their own version of this that's kind of competing with Windows Update. So there'll be like the ASUS driver update utility that's updating all the ASUS stuff, like the ASUS BIOS and the ASUS Command Center. All that stuff gets updated by ASUS software, but then Windows Update's doing its own updates, and sometimes both will try and install a Wi-Fi driver or whatever.
Yeah, so the ASUS stuff would become largely redundant if the Microsoft stuff was flawless.
That's right. They build these things because the default experience sucks.
And not even necessarily whether it's the motivation to build it or not. You could say they would do that anyway because they want to put ASUS branding over everything and make you use their stuff. But more to the point, people wouldn't actually bother using it because there'd be no need to use it, because the default thing And again, it's like Edge. People would primarily use Edge over Chrome or Firefox or whatever other browser you may use if it was one of the best or close to the best or the best.
Yep.
Because if Chrome's a few percent better than Edge, most people aren't going to bother installing it, especially if they've already got an account, like a cloud-based user account on Edge, and they use that, and you're not going to bother switching. And that's one of the reasons why people generally don't switch browsers, even if one starts to become better than the other, because it can be, can be a hassle. I know they try to streamline that changing over and moving all your data across, but yeah.
And there's very little innovation in web browsers. They're kind of a solved problem, like tabs, you put in URL, it takes you and shows you website. Like that's...
Yeah, you can get like hardware acceleration problems and, how much RAM and stuff it uses. But yeah, generally the good ones are pretty well optimized and they use what they use because that's sort of what's required.
Coming towards sort of the end of this list, I've obviously put in as well just the Microsoft Store in general. I think the whole situation of Microsoft trying to make the store like the primary app installation tool, sort of like, hey guys, come and install all your apps from the Microsoft Store, but then just failing miserably at making that the go-to thing, I guess is just indicative of the problems that Microsoft has with these things. Like the reason the Microsoft Store failed is not because, well, it does still suck to some degree today, but it's because it sucked really bad when they launched it. If the Microsoft Store was launched and worked super well, like you load it up for the first time and you're like, whoa, this is way better than going to all the websites and downloading all my applications. Like this is what I want to use for installing apps on Windows. It would have been a great success. But because it sucked to begin with, it gets a terrible reputation and people are just like, oh, that annoying Microsoft Store garbage. I don't want to use that. It's the same with Edge. Like the reason people don't use Edge, despite all their begging and pathetic whinging, is because when Edge was first introduced, and this I guess goes even further back to Internet Explorer days, is people used it briefly. They're like, okay, it's the default thing. It automatically loads up or whatever. Let me just use it. Nah, this isn't as good as Chrome. And so people, the first experience they get is garbage and they switch back to what they know and love using. In the case of browsers, Chrome or Firefox. In the case of Microsoft Store, the alternate is going to individual websites and downloading .exe files. People preferred to Google things, click through to websites, trying to find the downloadable executable file, which you might accidentally click on a malicious website and get a virus on your system. People preferred to do that over the Microsoft Store because the Microsoft Store was that bad. That is an epic fail.
Yeah, first impressions are obviously important, but I still think relative to other third-party tools, the Microsoft Store is still garbage.
Yeah.
Like, does it hold a candle to Steam? I don't think so.
No, it absolutely doesn't. And I think Steam kind of shows you what can happen when a company is an effective monopoly. Because make no mistake, Steam is effectively a monopoly on the PC platform. Obviously, there is access to alternate stores and stuff, but most people use Steam. And yet they still are at the forefront of making the application good. And it just shows you what can happen when you've got a team of people who are actively considering what PC gamers are doing and trying to improve the application specifically for that use case.
Yep.
How often do you open up Steam and you see a splash screen, full screen splash screen that you can only say, remind me in 3 days about if you don't want to do whatever it's saying, that's advertising a feature like, I don't know, their game streaming thing or the Steam Deck or something like that. So, like one of the things that they sell, right?
Yeah.
That you will never see that. They will never do that. Well, maybe if they get sold or something.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about them being more of a monopoly, but they do have competition. I know based on a user base, it doesn't seem like relevant competition, but there's stuff like, the Epic Games Store that's sitting there waiting to take, whatever they can away from Steam and doing their best to improve and whatever. So if Steam does do something really dodgy or, we just see Steam go downhill in a similar fashion to Windows, then people will quickly and easily just jump ship to one of the other, services out there. And then those services will hopefully improve to incentivize people to jump ship. But yeah, with Windows, it's like, what are you going to use alternatively?
Well, the Linux crowd will be very upset with you that you aren't suggesting it as a legitimate alternative. But
I mean, it's an alternative. The legitimacy of the alternative really does depend, because there are a lot of like massive games that you can't play on there. Like, again, to my knowledge,
yeah,
you still can't play Fortnite on there. And I don't want to get into the, the what is it? They're just the reasons for why, whether they're political or whatever, for why that is. But you can't play Fortnite on Linux.
and many multiplayer games because of anti-cheat.
Because of the anti-cheat. So it's not my fault. Like, you can blame whoever you want for that, but it's not my fault. And there's heaps of people that want to play those games. So I can't just be like, well, Microsoft sucks, Windows sucks, so use Linux. It's not that simple, unfortunately. Because if it was that simple, we probably would be doing that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at the moment, with the current state of Windows and how bad it is in general, and the lack of advancements towards improvements for users, it's kind of primed people to be as interested as they ever have been in an alternate platform for gaming.
Definitely.
And I think, as we've seen with SteamOS on handheld devices, they've proven now that whether or not there's a native version of games or not, it is possible to play a lot of single player games specifically on Linux via emulation type things. And so they've kind of they're forging that path. Steam is genuinely forging that path with SteamOS, and I feel like we're not there yet, but we're as close as we have ever been to an alternate for gaming being a reality. And
Absolutely.
Microsoft should be panicking over this, by the way. Like, people's opinion, gamers' opinion of Windows is not good. And so if SteamOS was offering an alternative, because it did some of the things it doesn't do currently now, like it's largely just for gaming, installing other apps and stuff's not really feasible on SteamOS, and then obviously the anti-cheat thing. But for example, if there was an investment that was like, hey, EA with Battlefield, or not that Microsoft would do it now that they own Call of Duty, but you know what I mean, like an investment into getting these things working on Linux, I feel like we would be getting very close to people being like, yeah, I'm just running SteamOS as my gaming OS. So people are primed for this in a way that they wouldn't have been maybe 10, 15 years ago, when Linux was not an alternative at all, really. Like, it just wouldn't run 99% of games, just wouldn't work at all.
Well, even if it was as good as it is today, say, if Microsoft doesn't have these issues we've been discussing, and maybe there was a couple, you're always going to have a few grievances here and there with things, but if it largely worked, you wouldn't be searching for an alternative. You'd be happy enough with what you've got. It works. You're familiar with it. So, and that's kind of the frustrating thing with a lot of these companies. They don't have to do too much to keep everyone relatively happy. And again, you're not going to, getting back to the using the Linux thing, I know people will be like, but you can dual boot, you could dual boot. It's not really a solution. Like, I don't really want to dual boot, play the games that I play on Windows and then go play this other operating system that doesn't do a lot of the dodgy stuff. I'm still having to use that other. It's not really a solution, in my opinion. Doesn't address the problem at all for me. It's just, in a way, more inconvenient, I would say.
Yeah, it has to be a system where it allows you to do the vast majority of things that you were doing on Windows. So for me, like, I have a dedicated gaming PC, so I don't really do a lot of stuff outside of gaming, but there will be some web browsing and watching videos and stuff on there. But if, for example, I used my PC as well for other apps, work and stuff, Photoshop, whatever, like, SteamOS would have to in some way support that, so that, because dual booting, as you say, is not a very practical or easy solution. So SteamOS would have to come up with some way to get that working. But at least for some gamers, it would be possible, so long as the vast majority of games that they played worked. There was a web browser in there and a few other features. I feel like for a much larger percentage than currently use Linux for gaming now, they would be interested in that and would consider using it over Windows.
Yeah, well, I dual PC as well. So I've got my main work PC, which, that's a separate thing. And then I've got my gaming PC. And I really couldn't install Linux on either one of those PCs. And the gaming PC, I've been playing a little bit of Battlefield 6 recently, Fortnite, of course. and pretty much the games I exclusively play, or at least the vast majority of the time, require stuff like anti-cheat to work. So
Yep.
I'd be using the dual boot functionality to play one game for an hour a week type thing. Just obviously not
Yep.
going to work.
Yeah, they're gonna have to solve that. I think summarizing everything with the Windows situation, the way I see it is that Microsoft and Windows specifically has become, it feels like it's become very designed by committee, and has been, the focus has been on, as you've pointed out many times throughout this podcast, focused on anything that makes them money for investors. So obviously adding things in like AI means that they can say AI is in Windows. That means investors can get excited, pump money into Microsoft stock, and away things go.
Mhm.
That's what it feels like Windows is these days. There's too many teams at Microsoft trying to force their little side projects into the Windows operating system at the expense of making the operating system itself the best that it can be. So we've seen this with OneDrive, we've seen this with Copilot, we've seen this with many other features over the years. Edge, for example, Microsoft, everyone wants a little piece of the pie. They know it's a monopoly. They know it's this thing that gets lots of users across the board. And so they're tying in all of their executive bonuses, which I'm sure are related to things like user bases, the number of users using different features. Hey, get 100 million monthly active users on Edge, and now you get your whatever bonus as a project manager. That is the focus of Windows today.
Mhm.
And that's why we see, at least in my opinion, all of this garbage in Windows at the moment. They need to have a serious think. I'm not suggesting for a second that they will do this, because they probably won't. They need to have a serious think about, what are users using an operating system for? What are the fundamentals to an operating system? And how can we improve that for people? How do we get back to having an operating system where the focus is on the user? What is an operating system? What does it do? Focusing on those basics is just completely gone out the window. Well, completely gone out the window with Windows, hasn't it? So, yeah, it's just really disappointing, the lack of user focus and that sort of thing. It is a solvable problem. They can go back and start working on things that actually make the user experience good, fixing things, making sure that they're laser focused on, just the basic tasks that people are using the operating system for. But there's just it doesn't seem like there's any vision there at Microsoft. There's no leadership to get that done. Like, they just do not care whatsoever. And that's how we get this situation where there's just feature rot, garbage, bloatware, and all that sort of thing added into the operating system. So it's disappointing. It's, priming, I think, gamers for SteamOS in the next couple of years, depending on how development goes on that, to move to a different platform. I think they should be pretty worried about that, because, things do change over time. They can't rest on this forever, I don't think, if they just keep making it worse and doing things that, the actual users of the operating system don't care about all that much. So that's just my thoughts, I guess. Right, let's take a break. Enough talk about Windows, and come back and talk about our boring lives. All right, Steve, we're back. I don't think either of us have heaps to talk about in our boring life, but you kick us off. Is there anything that you've done that is interesting?
I don't think there's anything I've done that's interesting or boring outside of work. So everyone got sick late last week with the COVID. So I guess that's just like a cold now. I'm not really sure. Not really sure the updated classification of COVID now, but I never really suffered from it. I've had it multiple times. It was like a bit of a runny nose, bit of congestion, bit of headache. I was fine. Balin gets it worse than I do. My wife gets it a bit worse than I do, and the kids are just sort of like, it's a cold. So anyway, kids got it at school last week. We all got it. Balin's been pretty under the weather this whole week. He's sort of starting to come good today. So it's been a bit of a slow grind kind of a week. Haven't done too much stuff because, everyone's been sick. I've just, it's been pretty mild symptoms for me. So I've just been working away, doing my thing, but probably just a little bit harder to get motivated than normal. And like I said, just really at the moment, I'm just trying to wrap up stuff before the end of the year, like B850 testing. We've got so many months into that now, and that's dragged on way more than I would have liked, but it's been entirely out of my hands. I was going to say largely, but it's been entirely out of my hands. just with the way they've released these boards in dribs and drabs. So yeah, nothing. We were supposed to get some wild weather. Actually, we did get a bit of wild weather. I think it was probably more wild on your side. It backed off a bit by the time it reached me, but we were predicted to get dangerously high winds, 110, 120 kilometer per hour. I think it was even reported over in the US, the weather we are expecting to get in Victoria. I saw that on a few different YouTube channels and stuff. It was kind of pun not intended, blown out of proportion. We're supposed to get like these crazy high winds and stuff. And I think some areas did see that, but they were sort of saying it was going to be more of a statewide event. But I think we only saw maybe up to 60 kilometer per hour winds where I am. So that was relatively tame compared to what we have had in the past. So no tree damage, no destruction or anything, thankfully. And we didn't even lose power. The generator kicked on automatically for about, it was, I think, a 30-second period without power. And then it ran for like 3 to 4 minutes and then turned off when it was happy with how the grid was behaving. So didn't even get to use my big fancy generator. So that was a bit of a downer. But of course, it saved me money. I didn't burn diesel, so that's always a win. But anyway, that's really it on my end. Just sickness and not as high winds as we were expecting.
Yeah, it wasn't too crazy out my way. I wouldn't say it was like a generational storm or anything. It was just like a day with strong winds. So yeah, nothing much happens around my area. You're a bit more of a greener, more treed area. So it's more likely to have, trees falling on roads and stuff. But out my way, it's much more flat farmland.
You just had a few tumbleweeds.
A few tumbleweeds, yeah, probably blowing pretty hard. A bit of, just leaves and crap going everywhere, but nothing crazy. I haven't actually gone around and seen properly whether anything has like fallen over, like trees come out of the ground and stuff. But I don't think so from what I've seen so far. So I think it's all good out this way in terms of like the storm stuff. So yeah, just sort of a normal thing. But yeah, it really depends. Like I'm sure in some specific areas it was worse than others because it can be pretty localized to various different areas. So yeah, outside of that, yeah, I've been playing a bit of Battlefield 6, been getting into a bit more of that this week. Obviously it launched, I think, a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, starting to get into that and really enjoy it. So I'll probably have a bit more to say about that in future weeks. But yeah, I think Battlefield is back, as a lot of people have sort of said that have been Battlefield fans, and is one of my favorite multiplayer franchises. So yeah, it's certainly a very good, fun game so far. People might have seen me running around in there as Captain Delta E, which is my Steam name in the Asia Pacific region or the Asia servers. So you might accidentally run into me or something in there in one of those games every once in a while. You might see Balin as well, because I know he's been playing a bit of it. Outside of that, I did finish Borderlands 4, the game, fully up until the end, did everything in the game. I thought it's a pretty fun game. I've played all of the main Borderlands series games at this point, all the numbered versions. I don't think I played, there's one that's called like the pre-sequel or something along those lines, which I didn't play, but I've played the other ones. And yeah, this is probably one of the better games. I think it's better than Borderlands 3 if people sort of switched off that game a little bit. I just play it through the story. I don't bother with the end game sort of stuff. The end game in Borderlands 4 is very much just replaying main missions that you've already done previously, but with additional bosses at a higher difficulty with, more loot, sort of standard looter shooter live service type stuff, which I'm not hugely into. I think if there was, additional new missions in the end game, I might consider doing it. But yeah, like just the end game stuff doesn't super interest me. But the main story goes for about 30 to 40 hours anyway. So there's plenty of content in there to enjoy. And yeah, I mean, as far as the game goes, like the story is pretty forgettable. So it's not a game that you'd play for the story or characters. It's very bland and generic. They've toned down, I guess, some of the very over-the-top cringe humor from Borderlands 3, which was, pretty annoying, pretty grating, especially there's a lot of claptrap stuff in the previous game that was very annoying as you played through the whole game. Claptrap is more of a minor character in Borderlands 4 for the better, I think. But yeah, the story, don't play it for the story. I think the gunplay is very fun, like the general gameplay loop. I played as, I think the Vex is the character. Yeah, so I played as Vex and usually did the, she can spawn enemies and she can spawn friendly like ghost type things to help you out in battles and stuff, which as you level up that ability, yeah, makes the game really fun. You're doing lots of damage and dealing with enemies quite nicely there. Yeah, just lots of fun, interesting guns throughout the game that you can, obviously as a looter shooter, you gain a lot of guns throughout the game. Lots of them are very, very fun and have, unique abilities and stuff that improve the experience. I did a lot of sniping in the game. I found that very satisfying with some of the like one hit kill snipers that you can get and stuff like that. So yeah, just the whole gameplay loop throughout the game is pretty fun. There are 4 sections in the game, like 4 areas that you go to do different parts of the story. By the time you get to the 4th zone, I guess, or the end quarter of the game, I sort of, like a lot of these sorts of games that don't have strong story stuff to go along with it, it kind of does get, I enjoyed that last quarter of the game less than the earlier parts where you're sort of leveling up, finding those new abilities more quickly. This was, the end was just sort of, it is what it is. And by that point, I was finding the game very easy as well. I was just playing it on
Mhm.
sort of the default medium difficulty. I think if I had my time again, I would have upped the difficulty during that last bit to hard, just so that there was a bit more of a challenge. Some of the final bosses, at least with the build that I had, were very, very easy. So probably would have changed that a little bit. But yeah, outside of that, I think it's a really fun game, a better version of Borderlands than the previous one. I think the open world works. Some of the side missions are interesting and do some cool stuff and interesting boss fights and things like that. So yeah, plenty of content, good game. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I think maybe like Battlefield, Borderlands is a bit back to its bit back in form, bit better than it was previously. So that's good to see. But yeah, like I said, moving on to Battlefield now, and we'll get through all those different. I haven't played the single player at all, and I won't bother playing it because I've heard it's very bad. So won't bother with that. Just straight into the multiplayer, learning the maps, learning the guns, learning the different modes and stuff. I normally play Conquest, but Balin told me that some of the other modes are actually really good as well. So I think I've been playing what's it called, like Escalation and stuff, and the other
Mhm.
one, which are quite fun. So yeah, we'll see how it goes in terms of like leveling and things like that. Because I've heard the leveling is a bit slow. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, so far good little bit for games, at least the stuff that I've been playing. So yeah. Well, that'll do it for this week's podcast episode. Thanks for listening to the end, as always. If you want the Hardware Unboxed supporter feed, which is ad-free, you can sign up to our Patreon page. That gives you access to that via Patreon. Outside of that, just the usual stuff. We'll try to be back next week if there's interesting things to talk about. I know there was something you wanted to talk about with CPUs that we'll get to next week, but we've gone for an hour and a half, so we'll put that aside for then. And yeah, that does it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.